Hello there. Now, back to the Soong family. If you've already seen some of these episodes, I've been covering all the members of the eponymous Soong family tree, all the way up to the 24th century. The Soong family were known for being geniuses, but they were also somewhat known for being a little on the eccentric side of genius. None more so than the 24th century incarnations. Dr. Noonien Soong was an exceptionally bright individual, but was also kind of bonkers. His son, his biological son that is, was also that apple. It fell pretty damn close to the tree, and then I think it rolled back towards it. The two men had a lot of things in common. Now, for those who have perhaps been following this series, or if you started watching the playlist and you already have some understanding of the chronology of the Soong family, you should be expecting the lore episode to be here. But as of the recording of this episode and when I started this series, I didn't know that lore was going to appear in Star Trek Picard Season 3. And he hasn't been on yet. So we're going to give that one a miss for now and come back to it, because otherwise I'm going to do an incomplete episode and I'll only have to do like an update or a revision further down the line, which I consider doing, but I don't like being incomplete or inaccurate. There's more lore coming, and as a result the episode's gotta wait, so we're skipping lore. And before we get to data, we've got Altan Inigo Soong, the mad scientist, self-confessed, self-proclaimed son of Dr. Noonien Soong, and to be frank, an unknown mother. My original assertion was that he must have been the biological child of Juliana Taina, or Juliana Soong, as she would have been when married to his father, but it turns out she was his stepmother, and he was born to an earlier relationship. But who that woman was and where she is, stories we can tell about her have not yet been revealed to us. Altan is the human brother of Lore, Data, B4 and the two other Soong-type androids that were created. When he was born exactly we don't know, but we do know that he was active in the latter half of the 24th century. His activities were basically a continuation of his father's work. What he was doing again up to his father's death, not clear, not being with his father but pursuing his own interests. When his father died, he seems to have taken over the mantle of trying to continue the development of the technology his father originally pioneered. Always room for improvement. Despite the advancements of Data and of Juliana and how successful they were, there was unsuccessful attempts by Data to build more of himself, and as a result, Altan took up the mantle. In 2385, by this point, he was working with Bruce Maddox, a Starfleet officer and engineer who wanted to pursue artificial intelligence research to the point where he at one time wanted to pull Data apart to study him. With the synth attack on Mars taking place, Altan, and for that matter Bruce, were convinced that some superpowers, perhaps including the Federation, were behind the attack on their own shipyard. And they were certainly convinced that somebody else, as it would turn out the Romulans, were behind the attack proper. And as a result they moved their operation off-world to Coppelius. The Coppelius, similar to sort of the actions taken by his father, Noonien, who basically went into isolation on a deep-range colony with a small population to carry on his work, he did the same thing here, continuing to develop more advanced Soong-type androids that would eventually grow and blossom into their own independent civilization. He would also have some degree of success in recovering his brother's memories and personality somewhat, having a sort of little digital Data in his back pocket. But we'll get to that in the actual Data episode. Altan would actually continue a sort of an adjacent field of research. Although he disagreed with Maddox's concept of sort of sending back stealth androids to the Federation, which were to try and determine what the hell happened to Mars with the synths and other such things, he pursued a different technique, a technology of sort of neural transfer. Ability to transfer the consciousness of a living organic being into an inorganic body. This would be performed very effectively and life-savingly for Admiral Jean-Luc Picard when his human body would give out. A golem, as it was known, was created as a vessel, an android body which could transfer the consciousness. This body was much more like Juliana. It could age, it would behave and act like that of a adult human male. It'll get an itchy nose at an inappropriate time. Yeah. and generally speaking was indistinguishable from the real thing unless you really, pulled out a tricorder and started really looking. But the Golem's technique, which he pioneered, he was developing on this sort of android world in isolation, as usual, kind of away from the Federation and mainstream science. Like his father, he was somewhat ostracized by the mainstream scientific community. And although he was a genius in his field, because like his father, he tended to pursue taboo subjects, his own agenda, and really do things that interested him and were not necessarily for wider implementation, it meant that he wasn't a successful scientist. He also hadn't earned the notoriety of his father, because despite being a genius, basically what he was working on, his dad had already done. He was merely continuing his work and not doing anything original up until the project with the golems. This technique would eventually fall out of favour in the ensuing years because of a low success rate, but we do know that a descendant technology based on this, a procedure would still be being performed in the 32nd century, where you could do basically the same thing, create a golem, transfer a consciousness into it. This technique was based on what Dr. Soong had done in the late 24th, early 25th century to Admiral Picard, and the technique again being replicated on others, although again with a low success rate, but by the 32nd century pretty much worked like a charm. So he did have a lasting legacy, much like Arik Soong, whose genetic research was still being sort of fawned over in the 24th century. Altan, it could be argued, had a more lasting impact on the technological scientific landscape of the Federation when, 800 years later, people were still tinkering with his techniques and designs. He chose to live away from humans. He lived with the Coppelius androids away from the rest of the Federation, out just beyond the border, but was still considered, of course, a Federation citizen and had no particular animosity to the Federation. He simply he got along better with machines, basically. As a human, he was very much a Soong, in that he was, as I said, kind of quirky, sometimes abrasive, and generally a little antisocial. One of the sort of hallmarks of the family lineage. Not to mention the fact that he looked awfully a lot like his father and his brother. Now, I have a sort of back of my mind a little bit of a thought going on here, and this is based on actually a conversation I had in the comments of one of my previous videos, where someone actually asked me, were Khan Singh and Noonien Soong or Adam Soong actually related? Were the families connected in some way? Now, personally, I don't think they directly were, merely because I think we're looking at just similar names. And it's also entirely plausible for people to have the same name. I think they just got a similar name. But it did get my head thinking. In universe, what's the reason why the Soongs all look so similar? I mean, it's obvious why the androids do, but because Noonien just made them that way. It's simple. But why is it that Adam Soong, Arik Soong, Noonien Soong, Altan Soong all look strikingly similar? Before you say it, of course, out of universe, we know it's because they're all played by the delightful Brent Spiner. But in universe, what's the reason? It got me thinking. The earlier Soongs were very interested in genetic manipulation and genetic engineering. Now, there can be an element of sort of genetic predisposition to being very smart. That can be a thing. If you've got smart parents, as long as you're educated and stuff as well, there's a chance that you'll end up being quite smart. It's sort of how genetics works, but also not. I mean, a child of two idiots can be the next Albert Einstein, whereas a child of two Einsteins can be, the next Fred Flintstone. So it can go either way. But with a little help and a little bit of a push by, say, someone that's pretty damn familiar with genetic engineering, is it possible, just possible, that Adam Soong genetically engineered himself, or himself was genetically engineered by somebody else? I'm not saying he was an augment, but something similar, maybe a lesser. Or did he do it to his children? Because we know he was engineering his children. So did he have a biological child, a son, to pass on his name? Because we obviously know that his daughter went on to be a traveller and didn't stay and have kids. So She didn't pass it on, so someone must have done. So he must have had kids, either them biologically or did he engineer them? And if he wrote something into the DNA to give them a predisposition to being smart and increased intellect and to pass that particular chromosome on to generation, could that have affected their aesthetic appearance as well, resulting in a sort of genetic cloning, for lack of a better term, generation to generation, maybe getting a bit more watered down throughout the centuries, of course, but being genetically engineered DNA, augment DNA, is known to be pretty persistent and could possibly be. I'm not saying it is, and there's no evidence to suggest it, but based on that conversation, it made me think. Just maybe. Probably not. But it's an interesting idea. And, it is plausible within the confines of the science of the Star Trek universe. But what do you guys think? Tell me in the comments below if I'm talking out my horse's ass. Or is there something to that theory? Is it plausible? Is it possible? Is it likely? We don't know, really. But, yeah. Altan and Inigo Soong. So far as we know, the last of the Soong line. But, as I've said in my Noonien Soong video, they seem to get around and get up to stuff that we don't really know about. So it's entirely plausible. Entirely plausible. He's got 10 kids that all look exactly the effing same as he does. And with that disturbing thought, and if you made it all the way to the end of this video, I thank you for watching. And please like, share, subscribe, comment down below any of your thoughts, and bye-bye. I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy making these. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving a like, share, and a subscribe, and maybe checking out the other videos on the screen right now. And in the description box below, there are links to my other social media accounts.